Welcome to Graphic Design Fundamentals. My name is Shane Latane. I'm a graphic designer and educator. I've been teaching graphic design for over 12 years now in several different institutions. On the screen before you, you see the best way to get a hold of me. ShaneL@shaw.ca is my email. If you would like to see my personal portfolio site, you can go to raininspain.net. But more importantly, I have a teaching blog, The Idea Refinery, where I post video tutorials, student work, and various other things. Let's jump into what we're going to be talking about in this class. Now, if you were to read the course syllabus, you would see that it says in the course description, this is an introduction to design fundamentals and visual communications practice. If you were to keep reading, though, you would see that through applied projects, students explore elements and principles of design, implement creative processes, apply compositional theories, and critically reflect on their design solutions. Now, that's a mouthful. But it's a very important point, and I do want to emphasize this, but I think I'm going to emphasize this with the help of graphic design. Let's look at this idea a little bit differently. We start off talking about creative/critical thinking. Now, in my mind, creative and critical thinking are paired. We'll talk about this idea a little bit more in depth later in the course. Creative thinking allows you to come up with multiple solutions. Critical thinking allows you to choose the correct solution from that list. This is very important for you as a graphic designer. Something else that's really important for you as a graphic designer are technical skills. We are going to spend some time in this class talking about the technical skills that you will need to execute course projects. And along with all those things, I'm going to insist on professional practices. Primarily what I mean by that is following a method or a process as you move from initial problem to final solution. We want to be able to do so using a method. Professional practices are absolutely crucial. We can't rely on inspiration to drive our creativity. Now, this intersection of our three elements of creative thinking, technical skills, and professional practices is what I'm looking to develop in all my students. Now, everyone coming to this course will have a diverse skill set. What I like about graphic design as a profession is that there's room for everybody. Some of you may be stronger in one of these areas than another. What I hope to do in this course is help to develop all these areas. Now, what I've done here is I've taken a rather complex idea and rather wordy sentence and graphically represent that idea using a simple Venn diagram. For me, this is the heart of graphic design, taking a complex idea and representing it in such a way that we can grasp it in a much more fundamental way. Let's just talk briefly about the projects that we're going to be doing in this course. In project number 1, we are going to create what I call shape compositions. Using Adobe Illustrator, we are going to use squares, circles, and triangles to create compositions that reflect a given idea. In this project, we are going to explore ideas of balance and contrast and composition. In project number 2, we are going to explore color. Again, using Adobe Illustrator, we are going to explore its tools for choosing and modifying digital color. In these first two projects, we are going to be exploring the form of graphic design, the visual components. In project number 3, we are going to add some content, meaning that we are going to try to actually express a certain idea. Project number 3 is the 100 iterations project, where we take a subject and come up with 100 visual interpretations of that subject. This is a great exercise in helping us to think creatively, as well as to diversify our own graphical thinking. In project number 4, we are going to create a SOAP package. The SOAP package is going to be created for a specific demographic, a demographic on which you're going to have to do some research so that we can come up with a design that is appealing to your potential customers. Finally, in project number 5, we are going to create a social cause poster. In this project, we are going to explore how graphic design doesn't necessarily have to be appealing or pretty to the audience. So let's talk about what graphic design is. Graphic design is visual. Well, of course it is. Another way of saying that, though, is that graphic design is formal. What I mean by that is that we are surrounded by the products of graphic design. And this is often how most people think of graphic design, as the visual artifacts that it produces, the brochures, the business cards, the websites. But before anyone ever sees the end product of graphic design is problem solving. There are specific problems and objectives that graphic designers need to grapple with before they ever produce anything that's seen by the general public. And these problems can be very complex, meaning that the solution for a previous problem won't solve your current problem. But even before we can begin solving the problems, we need to have a conversation. There is a lot of interpersonal interaction that goes on with a graphic designer, either with the art director or the client or your end user. But even before that, graphic design is a job. In fact, Graphic Design as a Job is the name of a book by Mike Montero, a graphic designer who's written a fabulous introduction for the beginning graphic designer. This is a very insightful book. I particularly recommend the audiobook version of Design as a Job, read by Mike Montero himself. But let me pass on what I believe is the number one most important professional practice, and that is keeping a sketchbook. It is extremely important that you, as a graphic designer, have a place that you can store ideas and retrieve them easily. But even beyond that, you want to be able to share them with others. You can't keep it in your head. Let's take a look at how some other graphic designers use their sketchbooks. The very first thing that I would suggest you do with your sketchbook is something I just call documenting. And this is really simple stuff, the research that you do, or the lists that you make, or even mind maps. Mind maps are something we'll talk about later in this course. But so much of what graphic designers do happens here at this stage, where we accumulate and analyze all the different components that go into our work. Once you've done your research and your mind maps, now it's time to start doing some visual exploration. And again, a sketchbook is where that work is going to happen. Doing this type of visual exploration is kind of like muscle development. It's hard at first. The more you do it, the more you develop that strength. That's why it's important not only to have a sketchbook, but a sketchbook that is handy and easily accessible at all times. Another thing that you can do with your sketchbook is contextualizing. This is where we start to take our designs and think about them in broader terms. How do they fit into a layout, for example, or maybe into a broader environment? Critical aspect of keeping a sketchbook is where we start doing our evaluating. This is where we need to go back into our past ideas and start to think about them, analyze them. It also allows us to get feedback from others. And then we repeat. Iteration is the key to the creative process. Documenting, experimenting, contextualizing, and evaluating is an iterative process. I've been an instructor for a very long time now, and I've been on many intake committees where we look at portfolios for incoming students. And the first thing I always want to see is their sketchbook. The sketchbook is what really shows what kind of visual thinker a person is. As part of this course, I will be wanting to see your sketchbook. We'll talk about how we'll do that a little bit later. Let's talk briefly about form and content. I mentioned form and content earlier when we were talking about our projects. I mentioned that the first two projects were very much explorations of form, and the final three projects introduced the idea of content. But I think this could be made even clearer. What we are trying to do with our form and content is create meaning and interest in a viewer. I think this quotation by Paul Rand best describes the relationship between form and content and meaning and interest. Form and content must live in balance. When form predominates, meaning is blunted. When content predominates, interest lags. Let's use graphic design again to help with this idea. Let's imagine for a moment that you want to convey a thought or an idea to somebody else. That thought we call content. Don't let the word content fool you. It doesn't mean it's just data or factual points. There's an emotional component to content as well. And if I could, I would put it all into my audience's mind. But I can't. I have to put my content into a form that will both be meaningful and interesting enough to my viewer. When I'm doing that process, trying to find the correct form for my content, then I'm designing. Now, in the situation I have right now, the content and the form are pretty much identical. But this process goes for any thought or idea. Let's look at this dynamic in a slightly different situation. Imagine you are the graphic designer for the Our Soap company. And what you would like to do is have people buy your soap. In order for that to happen, your customer needs to have the thought, I want to buy your soap. As a graphic designer, what do you do? Well, your first thought might be to create a cool logo. Let's be honest, that's what a lot of people think of when they first think of graphic design. And it is true that in our very commercially oriented world, logos are something we encounter on a regular basis. But let's go a little bit beyond that. We could make a rational appeal and create an informative brochure about our soap with helpful graphs that suggest that you will be 50% cleaner than if you used regular soap. I'm not sure a rational appeal, though, is going to work on an item such as soap. Well, we could always try an emotional appeal. How about making our packaging stand out on a shelf? Perhaps it has certain retro graphic elements that suggest old running shoes, that evoke nostalgia in a certain demographic. Or if we have a little bit more money, we could buy an advertising campaign where an image of a slightly idealized version of our customer is on some wind-swept beach holding our soap. We see these sort of aspirational emotional appeals all the time. I call them aspirational because they essentially try to flatter our customer into believing a better version of themselves is just one bar of soap away. However, graphic designers are more and more being asked to make ethical appeals. Socially aware customers are now much more discerning about the products that they buy. In fact, designers are having to think about sustainability and environmental impact. As a graphic designer, there's many ways that we could approach this problem of trying to spark meaning and interest in our viewer in order to spur some action on their part. But in our little scenario here, there's something that's really missing, and that is, what is our viewer, what is our customer thinking? Before we start designing, matching our content and our form, we need to know what moves our audience. Over the last decade or so, we start to see that graphic design, like all design fields, are becoming much more human-centered. And by that I just mean starting every project with the same question. What does my audience need to know? What does my audience want? This requires, on the part of the designer, a great deal of empathy, which, if you think about it, doesn't have much to do with graphic design at all. But in reality, it's key. If we're talking about empathy, then what we're talking about is psychology. So as a graphic designer, you also have to understand what motivates people. Why do people do what they do? But people aren't merely individuals. We exist in larger groups. That means we have to also have social awareness. A graphic designer really does need to understand the language of the culture in which his audience exists. If we're being social aware, that means that we have to think about anthropology, the study of cultures. How do ideas propagate? And if you're the type of graphic designer who does web testing, you may encounter data and statistics. And I could keep on going. There are all sorts of subjects that arise. Suddenly, selling soap isn't so easy. I wanted to finish this video with one last topic. We've been talking about form and content and meaning, but let's talk about this in a little bit more detail. How does form become meaningful? Let's start with the most simple graphic form that I can imagine. A point. Technically, a point really has no dimension, although this really is just a very small circle. Graphically, this represents a tiny little space in our composition. It's hard to imagine coming up with anything less that had less presence. Could we make this meaningful? Well, let's give it some context. Now we see that this point is actually a point on a graph of your current interest level. But what if I told you that in 1 minute from now, I could take your current interest level up to the level of your mind being blown? How would I do that? Well, let me take away the context so that I'm left with this graph line between two data points, your current mindset and your mindset in a minute from now when your mind is blown. This is just two dots in a line, yet I've just associated it with your mind being blown. I'm going to do a small adjustment to the balance of these lines and dots. This graphic now is associated with your mind being blown. I could now use this in other applications. For example, it could be the logo of my new company, the Mind Blown Company. An edgy startup, but give it a bit of time and perhaps my company will become a little bit better established. The takeaway from this is that form, even the simplest of forms to begin with, can take on meaning through association. As graphic designers, this is a very powerful tool. As we proceed through this course, you'll have lots of opportunity to take your graphic marks and give them meaning.